3rd, 2017, the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Walters, is recognized for 60 minutes as the designee of the Majority Leader.
Before I begin, I ask unanimous consent that all members may have 5 legislative days in which to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous materials on the topic of my special order.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, we gather here this evening to demand the immediate release of Michael Nguyen, an American citizen and Orange County resident, who has been detained by the Vietnamese government for nearly 2 months without cause. Michael, a loving husband and father of 4, owns a small printing business and is actively involved in his community and church. He is a law-abiding citizen with no criminal record in the United States. Michael traveled to Vietnam on June 27, 2018, to visit family and friends. When he did not return home on July 16th as planned, his family grew worried and contacted my office. They learned on social media Michael had been imprisoned by the Vietnamese government. On July 31st, the State Department was able to confirm Michael's detainment. We now know he has been imprisoned for allegedly violating Article 109 of the Vietnamese Criminal Code, Activities Against the Government. Article 109 is an arbitrary and vague charge the Vietnamese government often uses to justify baseless arrests. Michael could be held for months without formal charges as the Vietnamese government investigates. During this time, Michael will be denied access to an attorney or direct communication with his family. State Department officials are only allowed to visit Michael once a month. The Vietnamese government has refused repeated requests to provide my office with evidence to substantiate Michael's arrest. In a perversion of justice, the Vietnamese legal system allows individuals like Michael to be arrested and languish in prison before its government even begins an investigation or collects evidence. Michael's detainment is only the most recent example of Vietnam's troubling human rights record and lack of transparent legal system. Earlier this year, the Vietnamese government unjustly detained William Nguyen, an American citizen of no relation to Michael. I am deeply concerned for Michael's safety and well-being, and I demand his immediate release. Mr. Speaker, I would like to commend the Nguyen family's strength during this trying time. I'm inspired by their love for Michael and determination to bring him home. Michael's wife, Helen, is a nurse who works long hours with many emergency on-call days. Michael's flexibility as a small business owner allows him to be the primary caregiver for their 4 young daughters. His absence is devastating the entire Nguyen family. This American family should not have to spend one more day worrying and wondering when Michael will return home. Michael's story has touched many people. Several of my colleagues who have heard of Michael's detainment have joined my fight to secure his release. I am grateful for their support and their willingness to join tonight's special order. We will not stop until Michael is returned home safely and will continue to put ongoing relentless pressure on the Vietnamese government. I am committed to bringing Michael home so he may be reunited with his family, and will stop at nothing to make this happen. Now it is my privilege to yield and to introduce Congressman Ed Royce, a fellow Orange County resident and esteemed chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee. I yield to Congressman Royce, representing the 39th District of California.
Mr. Speaker, let me begin by thanking the gentlelady for yielding to me. And I want to commend my colleague, Mimi Walters, for organizing this special order. I want to commend her for her tireless effort here for the release of her constituent, who, by the name of Michael Nguyen, is someone whose family I happen to know. And I rise today to request that the government of Vietnam release an American citizen. And if I could just share with you my observations about this situation, we are really speaking out on behalf of a U.S. citizen from Orange, California, who was detained, as the Congresswoman has shared with you, on July 7th And what I wanted to share with you was he was touring Vietnam and visiting elderly relatives. I think is a very, very commendable thing that he does, that he stays in touch. He tries to do this once a year to see his elderly relatives in Vietnam. We have been informed that he's under investigation for engaging in activity against the people's government, which in this case is a spurious charge that the Vietnamese government is using to justify an arbitrary detention of a U.S. citizen. Now, this is an individual who is deeply missed by his wife and 4 daughters, the youngest of whom is only 8 years old. Michael's family has seen their entire lives turned upside down because of this senseless ordeal. Now, as I shared with you, I know the family. I know his wife, Helen, who works in health care in Orange County. And I can tell you what she and the daughters would tell you. This fellow is a loving husband, a doting father. The kids really enjoy his sense of humor. He's the guy that gets up and, because of his schedule as a small businessman, he's able to make breakfast for the girls every morning. He enjoys taking them to school, to the dance classes, to the sports practices. As school begins again back here in the United States, it's usually a time of excitement, but also nervousness for young students. So our heart especially goes out to his 4 daughters who are being forced to navigate the new school year without their father. And while his family suffers without him at home, Michael remains detained in a Vietnamese prison. And while in detention, he is provided only 1 meal a day and is allowed to buy a bowl of soup extra per day from the canteen. Michael is 54 years old. He cannot and should not be subjected to such treatment. It is really imperative that we speak out, because Michael could be detained for months on end. Some prisoners are held for years on these bogus charges. This situation is deplorable. Michael's case is an egregious example of Vietnam's troubling history of arbitrary arrest, and my fear for Michael's safety is the same fear that you've already heard Congresswoman Mimi Walters share with you. We do fear for his safety. We want him returned to his family here in the United States. The United States has a growing relationship with Vietnam, particularly in security and in the trade arenas. However, human rights remain a core value to us here in the United States, and we cannot separate rights, those rights, from our own ongoing engagement with the Vietnamese government. If you abuse our citizens, there will be consequences. All levels of the U.S. government should make every effort to ensure Michael returns safely to his family without delay. So here again is my request. Just allow this citizen to return back to his family here in the United States. We very much appreciate, again, Congresswoman Mimi Walters, you organizing this special order today. I yield back, Congresswoman.
Thank you. I would now like to introduce my friend from Orange County who serves on both the Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security Committees. I yield to Congressman Lou Correa, representing California's 46th Congressional District.
Thank you, Congressmember Walters, for bringing this most important issue to the attention of the American public. I rise today as well to address an issue of Mr. Michael Nguyen, an American citizen and resident of Orange County who is currently being detained by the Vietnamese government. As Mr. Ed Royce just said, we seem to be enjoying a stronger, closer relationship with Vietnam on trade and security. Then we have this contradiction that an American citizen is being detained. On July 7th, Michael Nguyen was touring Vietnam, visiting relatives, and he was arrested. It's been almost 2 months. The charge, Penal Code 109, which is activity against the peoples of government. Yet there are no facts have been presented, no evidence. He's being held, he's being arrested with no evidence being presented. His wife, his family, they're also personal friends of mine. I know this family. They are strong members of our community. That is why I don't understand how Michael could have been arrested in Vietnam. I ask the government of Vietnam, please release Michael. Please release him back to his family and to his country, the United States of America. With that, I yield back.
I would now like to welcome Congressman Alan Lowenthal, the co-chair of the Congressional Caucus on Vietnam. I now yield to Congressman Lowenthal of California's 47th District.
First, I too would like to thank my colleague, Representative Walters, for yielding and for holding this special order, this special hour. I'd also like to thank Representatives Correa, Royce, LaMalfa, and Green for joining us. Well, we're here once again, and I am outraged. We're speaking on behalf of another American citizen, and that's really important. An American citizen who was arbitrarily detained. He was imprisoned on vague allegations by the communist government of Vietnam. Let's understand who we're talking about, as has been pointed out. Michael Nguyen is a father of 4 daughters. He was on a trip to Vietnam with his family, and really with his friends, not so much his family, friends. When he didn't return home at the end of the trip, his family frantically contacted officials. Let's see what happened. He was taken off a bus as he was traveling from the city of Da Nang to Saigon by public security officials. He was then detained, imprisoned, and neither his family and, what is also important, the United States government were notified until after 10 days after he was arrested. You know, as part of an agreement between the government of Vietnam and the United States, the Vietnamese government must notify the United States within 96 hours if they have arrested an American citizen. This they have failed to do. Since then, we've learned very little why Michael was detained. The government claims, the Vietnamese government, that he posted on Facebook a plot to overthrow the government, but they have not shown us any evidence that this occurred. I also met with Michael's family and his wife, Helen, and they're stunned, they're hurt, they're confused, they're angry. How could this happen to an American citizen who was just visiting Vietnam? You know, as was pointed out just a few months ago, another American visiting this country was wrongly detained and coerced into confessing his crime for merely engaging in a peaceful protest. And that, as we've heard, was Nguyen. He was beaten. He was placed in jail. He has been finally released and returned to America because the charges against him were also bogus. In part, he was released because a significant number of members of Congress stood up and championed his cause. And again, I thank Congresswoman Walter for leading that charge. That's exactly why we're here in Congress, to defend the rights of American citizens. Michael's yet another incident of Vietnam's egregious human rights violations. As was pointed out, we have engaged in economic development with Vietnam. We have a closer relationship economically with Vietnam, but they have consistently violated human rights of the citizens of Vietnam. For anyone who speaks out, anyone who engages in religious freedom, they are an oppressive, persecutorial society that does not allow any dissent. You know, as one of the co-chairs of the Congressional Caucus on Vietnam, I joined with my colleagues of the caucus in support of the Vietnam Human Rights Act, which invokes sanctions per the Magnitsky Act, which not only imposes financial and travel restrictions for human rights abusers, but it also calls upon the Vietnamese government to release those political prisoners and to stop arresting citizens who just champion human rights, freedom, and democracy. This bill that we're pushing through Congress, and this will push us further towards accomplishing this goal, would also make the sale of military equipment or services to Vietnam conditional on improvements in human rights, and this is one of the classic examples of the lack of human rights that goes on. So I call upon the government of Vietnam to quickly close this case and return Michael Nguyen to his family. It's unconscionable that any American of Vietnamese descent, or any American who criticizes the Vietnamese government, and not saying that Michael did, but anybody who speaks out, anyone must fear that they are going to be arrested. If these incidents continue, and they continue to occur, this is going to lead to a serious reevaluation of our economic and diplomatic relationships with Vietnam. I call upon the government to do the right thing. Michael was just visiting. He has done nothing wrong. Please release Michael Nguyen back to the United States. Thank you, and I yield back.
My next colleague is an active member of the Natural Resources, Agriculture, and Transportation and Infrastructure Committees. I now yield to Congressman Doug LaMalfa, representing California's 1st District.
Thank you to my colleague, Congresswoman Walters from Southern California, for leading the charge tonight on yet another example of a United States citizen being detained or arrested falsely. At this point, 59 days into the process, no actual charge has been brought against Michael Nguyen. Is this justice, or is this some kind of game they are playing with our citizens that isn't appreciated by our country? And certainly, as my colleague Mr. Lowenthal was mentioning a minute ago, that is it something that if it continues to happen, we have to continue to reevaluate our relationship with Vietnam. Now, obviously, we went through some very difficult times in the 60s and 70s, but we've been building on that for a long time. We want to build on that. We want to have those good relationships and good trade and all these opportunities that make our country as well as theirs stronger with positive economics. But when you have this kind of action going on against a United States citizen, where in this country we enjoy due process, we foster due process. We encourage that. And so it's those that we trade with, those that we have partnerships with, those that we want to have relationships with. We want to not only encourage that, but demand that for the way our citizens are treated. In California, we have a very strong population of Vietnamese immigrants and people from the region that have immigrated to our state, including in my own district, that they've been very enterprising, become part of the community, in the few decades they've been here now, and that why would we not want to continue to battle for these citizens if they're going to travel back to Vietnam for whatever purpose, for tourism, business, seeing relatives that maybe didn't come over to the United States. So we're here tonight to demand the release of Michael Nguyen as a citizen of the United States and as a citizen of California. Michael's family has been wondering for a long time what is going on with our loved one. Weeks to find out. Is there some kind of update as to what Michael's status is? So we strongly, joining in with our bipartisan coalition of members here tonight, demand General Secretary Trong and the People's Republic of Vietnam respect the rights of our citizens and consider, again, the consequences that might come should this illegal imprisonment continue, or more like it in the future. So we'll continue to work together with Congresswoman Walters and our Secretary Pompeo to ensure that Michael is returned to his family as soon as possible because, again, he hasn't even been charged with anything other than being a U.S. citizen in Vietnam. It's high time he has his rights restored and not have this be harmful to him, his family, and our relationships. Thank you.
My next colleague proudly represents Michael Nguyen's family members who live in the Houston area. I now yield to Congressman Al Green of Texas's 9th Congressional District.
Mr. Speaker, I rise tonight as a proud American. I'm proud of the country's due process laws. In this country, you don't go to jail indefinitely. In this country, you don't just get picked up. In this country, you're entitled to have a lawyer upon realizing that you're being charged. I'm proud to be an American. And tonight, I rise on a mission of mercy, understanding that one of our own, an American citizen, is being detained without charges, no lawyer, little knowledge of what has happened to him. Imagine, if you will, Mr. Speaker, a wife anticipating her husband's arrival. He's supposed to arrive at the airport with a friend on July 16th. She finds out that her husband is not on the plane. She contacts the airline. They indicate that he was not among those to be on the plane. She then panics, as anyone would, and she uses every means necessary to try to ascertain what has happened to her husband. She finds out by way of social media that on about July 6th, June 6th, if you will, July 6th, that he was detained, and that detention is something that she can get very little information about. She is upset. She and her children are upset. They don't know what's happened to this husband, this father. So they reach out to their congressional representative, who has done an outstanding job, I might add. Congresswoman Walters immediately did that which is necessary to protect an American citizen. She contacted the necessary authorities, contacted the Secretary of State, contacted the ambassador, wanted to know what his condition was, wanted to know whether he was in good health, found out that he's okay, but has not been charged. Mr. Speaker, we in this country understand that when one of us is being detained unjustly, every one of us has a responsibility to do what we can to get that person released. Any American being held is something that every American is concerned about. Every member of this House will take the position, I am confident, that an American being detained unjustly should be released immediately. So I rise tonight, Mr. Speaker, on a mission of mercy, asking the government of Vietnam to release this American citizen. He has not been charged. He has no lawyer. He has friends and family who are waiting for his return. He was there as a visitor, seeing friends. This is something that he has done on previous occasions. I ask that he be released so that he may be returned to his family. In this country, we protect our own. He is one of us, and we want him back, and we want him back right away. I commend all of my colleagues for what they have said tonight, and we will shine additional light on this issue. We will not rest until he comes home where he belongs. I yield back the balance of my time.
Mr. Speaker, when I told Michael's family I would be hosting the special order, I asked if there was any message they wanted me to share on their behalf. I would now like to read a personal statement from the family. Michael Phuong Nguyen has been unlawfully detained for over 60 days. He longs for the comfort of his family profoundly and deserves immediate attention to return to the United States. Michael's wife and 4 children urgently and desperately appeal to all members of Congress right now to take actions to bring Michael Nguyen back home to his family where he belongs. All 4 girls are experiencing heartfelt anxiety, affecting their school and emotional well-being. He plays a crucial role in his 4 daughters' livelihood and needs to be where his heart belongs, with his family. Our prayers are with Michael Nguyen's family, and we want them to know we will do everything in our power to bring him home. I would like to again thank my colleagues for joining me this evening to support my constituent, Michael Nguyen. We will not stop working until Michael is released and returns safely to his family. Mr. Speaker, I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentlewoman yields back. Under the Speaker's announced policy of January 3rd, 2017, the Chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Nguyen, for 30 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do want to thank my friend and colleague, Congresswoman Walters. It's a reminder again that Vietnam has not lived up to the agreement they made in Paris to end the Vietnam War. They promised they would turn over remains. They promised they would give list of our POWs and MIAs. They lied. They didn't do that. They still have that information. In fact, it was one year I agreed with the Chamber of Commerce position, National Chamber of Commerce, on most everything, but I disagreed on a trade agreement with Vietnam because I could not vote to give some special deal to people that will not honor their agreements, that lie about Americans dead and who were POWs and missing in action, and remains of which they know and have never disclosed. So this is one more reminder that one thing we can do in this House is show courage and say we're not dealing with countries, no special deals at all with countries that harm Americans. We need to protect our own. And I'm so glad my colleagues on both sides of the aisle are calling attention to that fact, led by Congresswoman Walters. It's important to remember. And I hope and pray that we will do the right thing here in the House. I know the President has a heart for getting Americans back when they've been improperly detained, or in some cases when they've been properly detained, but especially if they're being mistreated. So Vietnam needs to wake up, and this House and the Senate and the President need to make abundantly clear to Vietnam that economically we're going to come after you. You better let our people go. I also want to address